Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. My name is Anthony Giuliano, and my guest is Alex Wulpi. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. It is nice to finally sit across a table from you face to face, because we have been in several virtual rooms together, and you reminded me we once met in passing at a restaurant, but you and I were on a trivia team a few
That's
years
right.
ago.
Yeah, it was a fundraiser for Big Brothers Big Sisters right at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah, I think I was it was a great event and I love trivia, but I think I was really desperate for social interaction. When that was going on, I was single, lived by myself, and I was like, I'm not seeing a lot of people. So I'm going to glom on to this trivia team that I don't know these people. I forget how it happened. I think
I just posted something on Facebook and you responded.
Yeah. So there was that, and then you recently took a class that I teach at Purdue Fort Wayne, social media professional certificate class. So thanks for doing that. That was super fun, as it always is. But today we're here to talk about your career path, the organization you work for, some of the work you do as a communication professional. And I want to start with career path, because you have an interesting one in that, if I'm correct, it started in the military.
Yep.
So what I'd like to hear about is what you were thinking about when you started thinking about careers. For some people, that's elementary school. For some of us, it still persists into adulthood. But what were you thinking about? Why did you take the path that you took, and how did it progress from there?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised right here in Fort Wayne. So didn't really feel like I had a direction coming out of high school. I did not know what I wanted to do. Wasn't a great student, so I knew, college maybe wasn't the right path for me at that time. So I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I joined the infantry, did that for 5 years. And it's funny when you come out of the military, at that point I was like, okay, it's time for college. I'm going to use the GI Bill. I'm going to go to college. And I started going in. I was undeclared for my freshman year. Being in the infantry in the Marine Corps, you don't come out with a lot of transferable skills. If I was in there working on if I was an airframe mechanic in the Marines, I could come out and be an airframe mechanic in the civilian world.
Sure.
In the infantry, your options are pretty limited. Yeah. So I didn't really have a whole lot of direction.
Yeah.
So I just started as an undeclared student, and it's funny, I just took a communications class, and it was just intro to journalism, or something that was just very
was it an elective? It's just I have time I need to fill,
just kind of casting a net, seeing what stuck, and what I liked, and turns out I really liked it.
Okay.
And I kind of got attached to a really great professor / advisor, and she really kind of encouraged me and helped guide my my thinking as far as a possible career path. And eventually I after my freshman year, I started working as a student worker in the office of the chancellor. Yep. At IPFW, and my title there was communications assistant. So basically, what I was doing there was I got to write press releases for the university. I got to help organize press conferences. I got to go to donor events. I got a behind the scenes kind of look at how the university was run at the executive level, and that was really eye-opening for me and a lot of fun. It was cool talking to people.
Sure.
I'm just kind of a very social person. I like to talk to people and meet new people. That was a great avenue for me to do that. So it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that. So I started thinking about, public relations, communications, marketing as a possible career path. And I kind of decided that that's what I wanted to do. So I tailored, my college path kind of towards that. I actually majored in rhetoric and public advocacy.
Okay.
That was my actual major. Yeah. With a minor in public relations.
Okay.
So I kind of just wanted to, I like writing. Yeah. I have a lot of fun writing. So that just kind of taught me how to use language as a tool rather than just a expressive medium.
Do you remember who the professor was who you mentioned, who that was? Do you mind sharing who that is?
Yeah, it is Dr. Michelle Kelsey.
Okay.
She is now the department chair.
All right.
Yeah, she's still there.
Okay. Yeah, I asked that because my whole trajectory changed because of one professor. Somebody who tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're a decent writer. Stop being a goofball. Put more effort in, and there might be something there." And now 40 years later, I'm in a profession where that's part of my work.
And I actually just bumped into her 2 nights ago, walking around West Central. But, in the years since I've graduated, myself and her and a few other graduates who were also in that same track, the rhetoric and public advocacy, we'll go out and grab some beers together. We'll kind of stay in touch. And she doesn't have to do that.
Yeah.
She does. Yeah. And I think that's really cool. And it kind of cements in my mind the fact that she's kind of went above and beyond. And really helped me kind of whittle down what I wanted to do for a career.
Well, it's, my limited experience in teaching is that's the most fulfilling thing. It's you're going to see some progress when people are in your classes, but where it really hits home is when you see them in careers. Yeah. And you hear little snippets about how what you told them 5, 10, 15 years ago is actually useful to them later in life. And that is probably as good for her as it is for you to stay connected.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're at PFW, you're working at PFW during a time when there's a lot of change at then IPFW, correct?
Yep.
So where do you go? What do you do next, and why do you make a shift at that point?
Well, late in my college career, when I was a senior, I got involved. I don't know if you're familiar with the Shepherd's House. It's a veterans charity. Kind of helps out veterans who are in some dire straits, substance abuse issues or addiction. Gives them a place to live and get back on their feet, and gives them the treatment that they need. Great organization, great people that run it. Their funding was jeopardized back in, this would have been maybe 2016 or 17. Their funding, which is majority of it was from the VA, that it got somehow jeopardized. I don't remember exactly what the exact situation was, but anyway, they went into crisis. They're like, this is 90% of our operating budget. As that need is getting greater. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't remember exactly how I fell in with this group, but there was a group of local citizens who just got together, and they were like, we are going to do something about this. We set ourselves up with a goal of raising $500,000 as quick as possible.
Wow.
So we started organizing events. We started talking to corporate sponsors and local philanthropists and all of that. And so what that did for me career-wise was, while I was still in college, it kind of made me feel like maybe nonprofits is where I want to go, where I want to focus my talents and my efforts. Yeah. So I got really kind of into the whole nonprofit fundraising idea. And then, before I graduated, I was interviewing at the United Way, and I ended up getting hired there as a donor relations manager before I graduated. Oh, wow. And then, as soon as I was done in college, I started there. Yeah. Okay. All right. So kind of ties into what you're doing today, but let's talk about the bridge between that and where you are now. What are some of the other things you did, and how did you make those transitions? Well, so I started working at the United Way, and it was great people there. It ended up kind of not being exactly what I thought of. There's a lot of turnover in nonprofit development. Oh, sure. Just because it's hard. Burnout is a real thing. Yeah, it's very difficult. And I learned that the hard way. After that, I worked there for maybe about a year. Then I got the opportunity, and this still to this day kind of makes me laugh. Just by happenstance, I happened to get connected with Mayor Tom Henry and his re-election campaign. Yep. My cousin was working with the campaign as like a photographer, videographer. Okay. And just asked me one day if I wanted to come give him a hand on a video shoot. Yeah. Not knowing any details. Yeah. So I went with him. And we shot I get there and there's the mayor and, his whole team. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's what this is. Yeah. Sweet. Yeah. And, I help him. I'm, helping moving lights and setting up microphones and putting things, moving things around. And his campaign manager was like, I don't know if I overheard him or something. They're like, yeah, we're kind of looking for a communications director, somebody that, could just write press releases, set up press conferences, deal with the media and do all this stuff. And I kind of just like, I don't know where I got like the courage or the felt like I had had to say something, but I was like, you know what, I can do that. Majored, like this is my resume, basically, just right there on the spot. And they're like, okay, let's grab lunch.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada. I get brought onto the campaign. I do that. It was a very successful campaign. I don't know what the threshold is for calling it a landslide, but he won by a pretty healthy margin.
Yeah.
So that was great. And then after that, I kind of, the campaign ends.
Yeah.
It's a finite
it's a job
experience.
Has an expiration date.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I started kind of putting some feelers out. I applied for a job here and a job there, blah, blah, blah. I ended up getting hired at Ferguson Advertising here in town. And that was, I loved working there. That was a great time. I got to do a lot of cool things like with Electric Works when that was still kind of in its nascent stages. Just basically all it was a bunch of artist renderings and a couple news stories. And Do It Best was also a client.
Yeah.
So it was fun just kind of seeing that whole, what would become Electric Works kind of be built from the ground up. And then, just a couple weeks ago, I went to the lighting of the big sign, the Do It Best and Electric Works sign. And it just kind of hit me. I'm like, man, I remember when this was just all an idea. And now here I am standing in this amazing campus, and it's an actual thing.
I think it's especially meaningful for folks who are Fort Wayne natives. I've been here for a while. I've been here for about, close to 25 years now. But to grow up in the city and to see what Fort Wayne has become, especially, projects like that, I think is a pretty great thing. And to be involved in it is another facet that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So you're involved at Ferguson, and then where do you go from there, and how does that get you to where you are today?
So from Ferguson, I kind of took a detour, and I started working for a private company in their in-house marketing department. And it was Midwest Shooting Center when they came into town. Having, military experience, especially in the infantry, where I was very comfortable and familiar with firearms and all of that, I thought maybe this will be fun. I like shooting guns. I like talking about guns. I like, taking them to the range and seeing what they can do. And so I started working there. I was the marketing director there for a while. Then it just got to the point where I just kind of realized I'm not a great cultural fit here, because in that industry, culture is king.
Oh yeah.
And if you align a certain way politically, you may have a harder time than other people.
Well, especially today, a lot of us kind of live in the middle, but we get forced to the edges, by some of that division, which, you and I could spend another hour talking about just that. But I think it's great when you notice that and you say, hey, this isn't for me. And I'm not going to suffer in silence. I'm going to move on. Because a lot of people do. A lot of people think this is the only job I'll ever have, and they stay, and then they hate it.
And I liked the people that I was working with. I won't talk ill of them.
Yeah.
It just kind of marketing to that customer base.
Yeah. Sure.
Made it a little hard to go into work in the morning.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to do this
Yeah.
anymore. The people there were great, but it was after the Uvalde shooting, and then like a week later, the Buffalo shooting in that supermarket. And what happens in that industry after each one of these tragedies is sales spike. And so I was told, how do we exploit this? How do we, people are going to be, knocking down these doors trying to buy, AR-15s and ammunition. And I kind of just took a step back and I'm like, I can't.
Yeah.
Well, I can't sleep at night, and I don't want to do this anymore. So I had to leave there.
Yeah, I think you and I are well aligned there, and I won't go down that rabbit hole too far, but it's a huge problem nationally, and there's room for compromise there, but there doesn't seem to be much of it, unfortunately, and exploiting it's a whole other thing. So you moved on from there, and you're in the position you're in now. So tell us about the organization you work for and what you're doing, because I was fascinated to learn how old the organization is. It's one of the many things I don't know. So tell us about Crossroad, your involvement, and what the organization's all about.
Well, yeah, so I started working there in July of 2022. And it's actually funny because after the mayor's campaign, when I was interviewing for jobs, I actually interviewed for this exact job.
Yeah.
But I had to, and they offered me the job.
Yeah.
I had to turn it down because I had already accepted a position at Ferguson.
Yep.
So it just so happened 3 years later, that job is posted again.
Yeah.
And my mom actually sent it to me. She's like, didn't you already interview for this? It looks like it's back open again.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, well, okay. So I just kind of emailed the chief development officer who I had spoken with, a few years prior, and said, hey, as it so happens, I'm back on the job market. I'd love to come in and speak with you if you'll have me. Long story short, she hired me. I actually got COVID and I had to push back my start date, so that kind of sucked. But yeah, so I started there in July. And yeah, so it's Crossroad Child and Family Services. It's a nonprofit that helps children and families with like mental health needs. They have counseling. They have community services where they'll go out and help families in the home. Yeah. They also do they have a residential program as well.
Yep.
So kids who are going through, like a mental health crisis.
Yep.
Or, some other emotional behavioral challenges.
Yeah.
Who are not succeeding in the house or in their school.
Yeah. Another place where the need seems to be going up dramatically.
Yeah. And then they also have like a alternative education school, Crossroad Academy.
Yep.
So that has kids that are coming in from all over the community who are just not succeeding in the classroom because of certain issues, be they emotional, behavioral, mental. So it's just a great community resource that not a lot of people are aware of, just because up until maybe 10 or 12 years ago, they did no external marketing in the community.
So was that because the demand was high enough, they really didn't need to, that, clients were coming their way, whether they, tooted their own horn or not, or why was that?
So the way it works is the kids that come there to be in the residential side of things, they're referred by, people that work for the Department of Child Services. They can be referred by sometimes they come to us from like the juvenile probation office. So there was really no need to market services to the community, because it's not like you could just come and be like, hey, I'd like to have my son live here.
Yeah, sure.
So there was really no need to market. So a lot of people didn't even know that Crossroad exists. Up until, a decade or so ago, when they started doing the outpatient counseling, when they stood up the school, and started offering community services staff to go out and help people. Then that's those opened up those revenue streams, so they needed some marketing done. So we're a little behind the curve still. I feel like, especially like you said, it's very old. Nobody realizes how old we are. We are. This year is our 140th anniversary.
That's amazing.
So it started in 1883. By the German Reformed Church of the United States, which is their Lutheran denomination. It started as the orphans home, the Fort Wayne Orphans Home of the German Reformed Church. I think was the original name.
The new name is shorter. That's good.
Yeah, definitely. And it started out as an orphanage. Back in the 1880s. This was a very agrarian community, and there were a lot of people that died in farming accidents. Believe it or not. So there was a strong need for orphanages and places that could take care of kids that didn't have any other options. So in 1883 they kind of opened this place up. Just had one kind of farmhouse. That was it. And as a matter of fact, it's still on the same exact property that it was 140 years ago. We're still there.
That's amazing.
We have not moved. We have not picked up and moved over here or anything. We are still right there where we've been the entire time. And all of the land, it was on 200 acres, and it was a working farm.
Wow.
Because this was a very agrarian community. These kids worked the farm.
That used to be the rural part.
That was the sticks.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so it was a working farm, and these kids would work on the farm. It was before child labor laws, of course. But what it did was give them the skill set that at that time in this agrarian community was very valuable and in high demand. So that set them up for a life where they could be productive, contribute to the community, and all of that. So it really worked out well. And they did that until the 60s, 70s. It was then the board of directors back then, decided that they're going to start parceling off the land.
Yeah.
That was not needed for farmland anymore because, the city was expanding into that area and they kind of saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
So they decided to kind of piece off this land and sell it to, certain people on the condition that whoever bought that land would use it for the well-being of the community.
Okay.
So that's why you see Parkview Hospital.
Oh, wow.
That's why you see the Veterans
amazing.
Hospital,
Yeah.
Parkview Behavioral Health,
Yeah.
Early Childhood Alliance. There have been a mishmash of other, nonprofits and medical providers.
Isn't it recent that, I'm going to forget the name, they used to be on Lima Road, moved
Byron.
Yes.
Byron Health.
That's okay.
Yep.
So that now.
And that just happened, a few years ago.
Yeah.
That land was still crossroad land up until a few years ago.
Wow.
And now it's Byron Health.
So this is one of the reasons I do this podcast is I learn all this stuff I didn't know. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really is fascinating. And another fascinating thing is they kept excellent archives.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're being the 140th anniversary this year, we're, gearing up to do some cool videos and a lot of cool events and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's very extensive archives of, pictures, videos. I found of like maybe a dozen film reels, 16 millimeter film reels.
Wow.
I still don't know what's on them because I can't find anybody with a 16 millimeter projector. They're hard to come by.
So listeners, if you have a 16 millimeter
please get in
projector,
touch with me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could look at payroll records from the 1890s.
That's
if
amazing.
I wanted to. Everything is still
and that's
there.
gold for someone who's in your job.
Yeah.
So you're bringing together a lot of different facets. It's like your interest in the community, being a lifelong resident of Fort Wayne, or at least having grown up here.
Yeah.
Your interest in nonprofits. It sounds like there's been a through line where you have a heart for behavioral health, and seems to all come together in this position. So in terms of, you got a great story to tell. How are you actually doing that? What are some of the things that you're working on?
So, like I said, the big thing, kind of the thing that I've been kind of aware of and kind of preparing for since I started was the 140th birthday. So, we really want to put some things together that showcase the longevity of the organization, because not a lot of organizations survive 140 years.
For sure.
Not a lot of organizations that do survive 140 years survive all in the same exact spot and have all of these records and photographs and media to kind of draw from. So we really want to kind of share with the community that we've kind of been here the entire time. Not kind of, we have been. And, you might not know the name, but we've, fill a vital community need. Doing this for these children and these families. So that's kind of what we want to share. And, we're going to be doing a lot on social media, obviously. We're going to be using a lot of traditional media. And we want to invite people onto the campus. We want to, the campus, I think, because I'm looking at all these old pictures all the time. There were beautiful, like stone and brick buildings with like big tall spires, and it is not that now. There's still majority of the buildings on campus are 70, 80 years old. Our administration center, welcome center, that was just opened up in 2021. So that's new. But yeah, we want to show people, kind of what it is that we do. And you might have driven by and you might have always wondered, what are those buildings? And, you might see the crossroad sign, but that doesn't share our mission or our vision or values with you. So it's kind of exciting to kind of introduce people to Crossroad. And now the biggest challenge, of course, from a marketing perspective is, HIPAA. HIPAA kind of the HIPAA guidelines and regulations makes it so we can't show the kids under any circumstances. The privacy of the children that live on campus or that come for school or counseling or whatever, that is paramount, and it will always be paramount. It presents a very unique marketing challenge though, because we want to share with donors the work that we're doing. So how do you share that message without showing what it is that we're actually doing.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk about it as much as we want, but at some point you're going to need some, visual assets to share. So that's kind of a unique challenge that we face.
So do you have this question, might be naive, it might be ignorant, it might be both of those things. Do you have the opportunity, if parents kind of opt in and say, my family had a great experience, to do testimonials with them, to do video with them? Is all that on the table?
Yeah, it is. And I did that actually just a month or so ago, and I'm actually kind of in the process of doing it now with the former resident. But yeah, I sat down with them, I kind of interviewed them, and wrote up a piece that I put in that what's called the Messenger, which is kind of an external newsletter that's gone out every month for the past 140 years. And up until like 1920 or 1930 or so, it was entirely in German.
Wow.
Because this, I don't know if you're aware, but this is a very heavily German.
Wasn't it true
community.
that like the street signs were bilingual up until around that same time?
Up until about World War I, everybody spoke German in Fort Wayne. It was a German town. It was a German farming town.
Okay. Interesting.
And then, World War I happened, and obviously sentiment changed towards Germany.
For sure.
But that is what it is.
Yeah. So are you planning, and you may have mentioned this, but I've been my mind has been thinking about this campus and this history, and you're kind of taking me places, but are you planning an event for the 140th? And if so, what does that look like in 2023? Because events have always been a challenge. They're a greater challenge now. Yeah.
So again, the biggest thing, and we just had a meeting about this today, as a matter of fact, we want to have it on campus again, but present certain logistical challenges. Like I said, the privacy of the kids must be maintained at all costs. So inviting a bunch of donors, community leaders, and philanthropists to campus isn't entirely an attractive idea.
Yeah,
so
sure.
We do want to put on an event. October 17th precisely is the exact birthday.
Okay.
We're just kind of right now just trying to nail down a venue and kind of talk about how much money we want to spend, because in the nonprofit game, your options are kind of limited as far as how much you want to spend.
Oh, sure.
So it's still in development. We're still trying to nail down what it is we want to do. Yeah. But we definitely the thing we definitely have to do is just share our message, share our history with the community.
So what does your team look like? At some nonprofits, communication is a department of one. There's others that are fortunate to have, strong teams. Where do you fit into that?
So I'm part of the development team.
Okay.
So I work under the chief development officer, and then, my colleagues include a resource development director who is in charge of grants and like in-kind donations and all of that, and then a donor relations director, who's the one who's going out and speaking at events and talking to donors and writing letters and, doing all that stuff. So, and then there's me, who's just kind of, doing all internal and external marketing, writing newsletters, doing social media. I've actually done a lot of graphic design, which is not something I'd ever done before.
Yep. Are you using Canva for that? Or
I'm using Canva. I'm trying to I'm trying to familiarize myself with like InDesign and Photoshop, just because I feel like that's kind of the next level. Yeah. So I keep trying to challenge myself to get better at those things, but Canva is just so simple.
Well, it's
so
amazing.
easy, and like I've gotten so good at it now that I can make it look professional. So.
It's amazing to me that the difference between the two, and I'm speaking quietly because many of the designers I work with hate Canva, but Canva is great for sort of that middle ground. Because to some extent, learning Canva is like learning a different dialect of English. Yeah. Learning the Adobe suite is like learning, Mandarin Chinese. Yeah. It's just, and I say that as someone who,
apt.
Was never a full-time designer, and last design program I used was PageMaker 6.5. But it's a skill unto itself, understanding how to use those tools, and Canva just makes it accessible. Yeah. By the way, this is not an advertisement for Canva. If you are listening and you're from Canva and you want to sponsor the podcast, that'd be great. But no shame in using Canva when you're doing other things, right?
Yeah, it is funny that Adobe is kind of picked up on the fact that people like Canva, so they came out with Photoshop Express. Yeah. And now I have that app. I have the Photoshop Express app on my phone, and they kind of, simplified and streamlined a lot of things to kind of make it, if you can do Canva, you can use Photoshop Express.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was kind of funny. They saw somebody kind of encroaching on their territory, and then they responded with product of their own. Yeah,
the product should have been called, "Oh shit, here's Canva." But yeah,
hope we're not too far behind.
Yeah. So it's kind of like sales and marketing. Then you've got the development team and the communication team working together.
Yep.
The development team hopefully retaining donor interest, generating new donor interest, and you sparking some of that by telling the story, trying to reach new people, get them in the proverbial funnel.
It's my job to sell the mission.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. All right. Well, it sounds like you have a great story to tell, so that's good. That makes it a little bit easier. Let's pivot to the quick hit part of the podcast. And I always disclaim that this does not have to be the quick hit part of the podcast. Sometimes this portion takes longer than the first portion, which is totally fine. We are not under time constraints. But tell me about, as someone who's worked in multiple fields, who's done things that you've really loved, and still moved on to new things, done things that maybe weren't the best fit. What's your best career advice? What's the one thing you've learned that you think other people should know about?
My career advice, I think, would just be find a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people place enough value on having a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't need to be someone that you work with.
Yeah.
It doesn't really even need to be someone that's in your field.
Mm-hmm.
Just someone who's experienced, knows how to navigate certain, whether it's a bureaucracy or whether it's just like the professional office setting or something like that. Like I had somebody I would consider a mentor. His name was Chris. He was the CEO of the local, the Greater Fort Wayne YMCA.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy. I met him while I was in college, actually, and I kind of realized the depth and breadth of his knowledge in the nonprofit game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of latched onto him. I was just asking him so many questions, and he would tell me so many stories. And he helped me prepare for my interview at the United Way.
Yeah.
And he helped, he kind of told me what they're probably going to be looking for. And, since I'm going to be doing fundraising and stuff, this is kind of the buzzwords to use in the interview, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And just an unbelievable help.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was so great having somebody who, was kind of looking after me for no other reason than they felt like I needed it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there's another through line I'm hearing in your experience. When I'm working with college students, I always say good things come to those who ask. And it's like with your position in the mayor's campaign, it's like you raised your hand and said, hey, what about me? A lot of people might not do that. You mentioned it took some courage to do that. With this, it's, asking for the help and tapping into the knowledge that other people have.
Yeah. If you really want to advance your career, being humble and, shy will get you absolutely nowhere. It'll take you backwards
for
probably.
Sure.
But
for sure.
Sometimes you just got to raise your hand, and sometimes you just got to walk up to the person and introduce yourself and have a strong handshake and look them in the eyes and, stuff like that. And it'll take you farther than you think.
Yeah. Well, and another thing I'm hearing in your experience, so you mentioned, the mentor who helped you with nonprofit, you mentioned the instructor at PFW who helped you along your way. It's have mentors, have this, sort of kitchen table cabinet of people you can go to for different things. Even at 53, there's still people I'm really reliant on because there's a lot I don't know, as I mentioned. So those folks who have been there, who have done that, who I can tap into, and instead of starting from complete ground zero, I can say, hey, help me at least accelerate where I'm going from here.
Yeah.
All right. Second question, and you may have already answered this, but when it comes to a myth or misconception about the organization you work for or the work that you do, or something that's not appreciated enough, what's something you either want to debunk or amplify?
Well, I think you'll definitely agree with me on this. Is everybody thinks it's easy to run social media pages.
Yeah.
And it is easy if you put next to no effort into it.
Yeah, for sure.
And you treat it like your own personal page. You're just like, well, when I feel like posting, I'll post. And if I have a picture to share, I'll share it.
Yeah.
But if you really want to take it seriously, if you really want to see some outcomes from your social media page, you have to treat it like a science. You have to treat it like a tool rather than, just some fun thing you do in your free time. So, I tell people what I do for a living. I run, the social media for this organization and blah, blah, blah. And I've run social media for pretty much everywhere that I've worked. And they're like, oh, I think I could do that. I have a Facebook page, or I'm on Instagram all
I'm
the
wildly
time.
successful on Instagram, yes.
Yeah, I have like 1,500 followers. I could do it.
Yeah.
I would nail it. And just trying to explain to them, like, no, it's like there's a science to it.
Yeah.
And it is a tool. There are right ways to use it, and there are wrong ways to use it.
Yeah.
And people I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
So that's what I would want to get across.
Yeah, well, it's as different, the difference between being on social media personally and being the brand voice for an organization, especially one that does serious work like your organization, is the difference between watching a football game on TV and being a linebacker in the NFL.
Exactly.
It's, it hurts. There are days when it doesn't feel all that good.
Armchair quarterbacks exist in every industry,
absolutely.
every job.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that may be a good lead into the third question I wanted to ask, the third quick hit question, although you can take it in a completely different direction. But what is one tool or a trick or a tip or a hack or something you use in your work that makes life easier for you? And it doesn't have to be a technology tool. It doesn't have to be a social media tool, but something that you think deserves a shout out. And we've already talked about Canva.
Yeah, Canva's great.
Yeah.
I will also say for writing, I don't know if I could survive without Grammarly.
Yeah, Grammarly's great.
Love Grammarly. And God, really, so at Crossroad, we have a subscription to the Adobe Creative Cloud, which I'd never had before, but that gives me access to Photoshop, Lightroom, Premiere, all the Adobe suite.
Yep.
And that is a fantastic help.
Okay.
Like, it's so nice having all of those programs available to me. And just that, like, having access to like their library of stock images and videos and audio and all of that stuff is great too. It helps me, create some really high quality, images for social media or for, marketing purposes, whatever it is. Just having that tool available to me, having that, vast library available to me is fantastic.
Well, especially in a role like yours where social media is a hungry animal, you got to always feed it. And, there's things that are going to be high production values. You're going to spend a lot of time on it. And then there's the stuff you need to turn out every day.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, we're going to do our best with this, but I have about an hour and I need to make it as efficient as possible and draw from as many existing resources as possible. I think that's where those tools really help.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Well, Alex, it has been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better and having you on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Congrats on all the good things you're doing, and congrats to Crossroads on 140 years. Who knew?
Thanks, Anthony. It was great being here.
Well, now you all know that Crossroads has been around for 140 years. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.